What is up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Nourish with Renata podcast. Today, I am so excited to share with you literally one of the most incredible, miraculous stories from a woman that I met very recently, and somehow it feels like we've been friends forever. Could I say that?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. So I'm so excited to introduce to you my new amazing friend, Carolyn. What's going on?
It is going well. It does. I feel like we've been friends for a million years, and that is so rich because in this day and age, we don't find that very often. So I'm just extending my gratitude for you being such a warm and welcoming friend. So thanks for having me on.
You are so welcome. So, first and foremost, before we dive into your journey through eating and eating disorders and healing, I'd love for everyone to get to know you a little bit more. So, what is it that you do?
Excellent. So, yes, by trade, I've been a photographer for almost 20 years, but that hobby actually led into a profession. But my main heart and goal has always been to write. So I'm actually a published author and writer. So I've been doing that for a numerous years. And with that, I've just been sharing my journey. So just like what your podcast is doing, I love sharing the journey through words and through portraits.
That's amazing. Okay, so I don't even remember how we got onto this topic of your nutrition journey and challenges. But when you told me about it, I literally was flabbergasted. I thought to myself, wow, what an ordeal for someone to go through and to be on the other side of. And one of the things that you mentioned was that a nutritionist literally saved your life. So I'd love for you to share more about this eating disorder journey that you went through and what happened to help you to get back into your healing.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So when I was just growing up, just the culture, my culture is you eat, whether you're sad, whether you're happy, whether you're celebrating, no matter what the case may be, it's you eat. And no matter what you're feeling. And not only that, growing up in, a lower income or lower middle class is you finish your plate. No matter if you're hungry or you're not, you finish your plate. And this over time, just through elementary and middle school, I started to see that I was just larger than most of the girls there in my school, in my, in everything. And I was not looking like everybody else's magazine. The things that I was wearing frumpy things. My hair was super curly and fuzzy and just big. And so it matched my personality. But I started really struggling, even in high school, and by the time I was in college, that was the biggest thing. I was running up to class in college and I had gained so much weight. Just miserable. And I ran up to the third floor to college and I was completely out of breath. And I was maybe 20, 21 years old. And I said, this is a really big problem. So I started dieting and exercising, and I'd done this a million times before. But the issue is I started eating the same thing every single day. I would eat 8 apples a day, and I would have a salad. And over time, it's not just a week or 2 weeks, and it just became a habitual situation. And then I started noticing that I would weigh myself, even though 4 years of the same meal 4 years I had been eating the same meal and going in the morning to weigh myself, thinking that there was going to be a shift. And it came to a point where I had lost 106 pounds. And I know that sounds like a great deal, which was great. I didn't do surgeries. I didn't do any of that, but I was very sick. And so I came to a point where a nutritionist, I was just about to graduate college, and a nutritionist stepped in and she just said, Carolyn, there's a disordered eating here. There's a disordered situation that you've got in. What can we do? And she actually took me on pro bono. And I mean, I'm a college kid. There's no way I could afford her. She took me under the wing, and I was still in the bottom pits of it. And I found myself in the hospital. And the nurse literally had two things, and she had a tube and she had like a meal. I can't even remember what it was. And she says, Carolyn, you can either eat this or I can shove this tube down your nose and you will eat. And my life changed that day. And so, I did not want something shoved down my nose to be forcefully fed. And so I ran back to that nutritionist and I just, so sorry. Yes, will you help me? And she literally, that nurse, that nutritionist certainly saved my life because I was just anemic. I couldn't move. I couldn't exercise. I was hurting my body by exercising 3 times a day on eating apples. There's plenty of nutritional value there, but not enough because of the exercising and the intensity I was putting on my body. So I was hurting my body. And so that was the story, Glory, that, over time, I was able to have a relationship with other things. That nutritionist just implemented, hey, you don't have to change your 8 apples a day, but let's implement an orange or let's implement a banana. She was very kind and sweet and very slow with me. And that was the greatest gift. That was in 2008, where after 4 long years, I'd ate an orange. And that was the biggest thing. And so over time, I just started to learn to love food. And in my culture, we love food. We love, trying new things, trying new, eating the color of the rainbow is what she would tell me. And now I love the color of the rainbow. I love feeding my body what it needs so I can exercise, so I can go out and play, so I can enjoy things. And so I'm just super grateful for that nutritionist and that nurse that literally saved my life.
Wow. I literally have chills as you're sharing that story, even though I've heard it. Like it still is so impactful because as I shared with you, this is not something that you're alone in. I know so many women that I've personally seen through my practice that have had eating disorders as well. And I want to highlight a few things that you mentioned. For 4 years, you only ate apples.
Thinking I would find a different number on the scale the next day.
Yeah.
There was something wrong. And it was because I was telling myself that if I could just lose 1 more pound, just 1 more pound, I would be attractive enough, or I could be funny enough, or I could be, there was something wrong. I had been following magazines and social media was just on the cusp of coming in. And no, I am not the only one. And thankfully, I have moved past this, Glory, but I know that we are just at the peak because of social media and what social media and marketing is driving us to, what we need to look like, what we need to say, what we need to do, what we need to be doing with our time. And it's just not true.
And there is a huge cost associated with thinking in these ways or being conditioned to think in the way that a woman's body should quote unquote should look a certain way. I'd love you to share about what happened to your teeth, if you don't mind, from eating all those apples a day.
Yes. So I actually studied addictions, which is kind of weird, a compulsion. That was my undergraduate work. And it's like, wait, how did I fall into this habitual situation when you study it? And that's what happens. Things just happen. And so my bottom incisors, I would go to the dentist and I would just have bloody gums all the way down to the root because I wouldn't cut my apple with a knife. I would just, if I was going somewhere driving, or I'd just grab my apples, have literally 8 apples in my canvas bag or school bag, and just gnaw on them on the rest of the day. And so when I would go into the dentist, my incisors were literally, the gums were receded all the way down to where my dentist was like, Carolyn, you have to do something different. Of course, I didn't tell him what I was doing. I just said, oh, well, I just eat apples and I have sensitive gums. You make excuses for your habitual situation, right? And I was making excuses why my gums were, he would ask, well, why aren't your gums at the top, kind of hurting? It was the bottom ones where I would be just peeling it off, and they would just bleed profusely. But at that cost was nothing. That cost was nothing for me. I wanted a special number on that scale, and I was willing to do whatever it took to get to that number. And that includes misusing laxatives, misusing laxatives, and every prepping to a family event. As in the Latino culture, you are going to have a large amount of carbs. And so I would prep my body with laxatives. I would binge all of the things that I would want to eat. And then I would take care of that situation with laxatives. And a marriage that I was in, I was hiding from my husband these laxatives, this situation, and making excuses. So like you said, there was a cost. There was a cost that came to it. It was dental work. It was hospital visits. It was, lying to my husband into a broken marriage. And it was terrible, just because of a number that I thought was going to fulfill me, when there was a much deeper root.
Why do you think you place so much power on that number on the scale?
It was something that I had desired. That 106 pounds that I had, lost, wasn't enough. It wasn't enough. And it was the attention. It was the attention. For the first time in my life, in my 20s, boys were looking at me, men were looking at me, wanting to take me out. And so instead of thinking, okay, we're there, I'm where I want to be, 106 pounds is a lot. I could have had a good 30-pound fluctuation. I still would have been healthy, right? But that attention, for the first time in my life, I was no longer the funny girl. I was the pretty girl. I was the skinny girl. But you could see every bone in my shoulders and in my back. I found myself one morning, I had a nosebleed in the shower, and I woke up over 100 feet from the shower. I had fell out of the shower and had crawled out of my bathroom. And I woke up, I don't know how long later, in a soaking wet mess in the carpet of another room, and just blood everywhere. And I was so anemic. My body was screaming out for help. And I was just, because of that number, that silly number that I thought was going to make me happy, that cost is where, I put my body in such distress. It was just calling out for help.
Wow. And what's really interesting is that you have all these instances where your gums were bleeding, where you passed out, on the floor after a nosebleed. Like, you have all of these little pebbles. I love Oprah. I don't know if have you heard of her? She's kind of a lesser known. Yeah.
The little ones.
Yeah. Small scale.
Yeah.
But she always talks about how there's always a pebble. And then if you don't listen to the pebble becomes a rock. And if you don't listen to the rock becomes the whole wall. And I feel like what you're sharing with us are all of these signs that your body needed help. It was, like you said, screaming out to you in all these different ways, until finally you were in the hospital faced with, you either eat or there's literally a tube put into your stomach.
Right. And there was no, when you're in that mindset of you're finally getting attention, you're finally looking like the girls that you wanted to, you're finally getting invited to this, that, or what have you, that's nothing. Okay, fine, shove a tube down my, it's one of those things where at that point in my life, I was willing to do whatever it took to make sure I maintained that. And then over time, I realized that I had a very, very bad relationship with food. And I feel a lot of, especially women, will have an emotional eating, right? Where they will go to food to comfort them. Where mine was, the adverse. Like, when I wanted control, I would not eat, because I had nothing in control of my life. In college, I wanted the perfect A's. I wanted the perfect car. Because I'd grown up in this kind of lackluster, I wanted more, but that driving force was not good. That mental capacity, there was something wrong there. I distorted my view of what I actually wanted to fulfill. What I really wanted was, I wanted to feel loved. I wanted to feel
Mm.
not rejected. And then I came from a wonderful, beautiful family. I had fantastic friends. There was something wrong with me in my heart. I had let the world tell me that I was not meeting its expectations. Mhm.
Right. And that's such interesting. Like, I love that we're talking about conditioning here, because just like you said, it's almost like this justification that we're receiving from the outside world when we're doing these really harmful behaviors that keeps us going, that keeps us thinking, okay, I'm on the right track. People are making quote unquote positive comments, let's say, about our physical appearance. And I really resonate with that because especially with the holiday season right around the corner, right? So many family members might think it's okay to make comments about other family members' bodies, or like, oh, you've gained weight, or oh, you look so good, you've lost weight, right?
Right. And I think that while other people might not know, they're just making small talk.
Mm,
It can be kind of harmful. And I'm not talking about, triggers, yes, that can be a trigger. But that if there is a situation where you have seen somebody drop weight drastically, and I'm not saying in every case, but if there is something, hey, how are you doing? Not just, oh my gosh, what are you doing? Gosh,
mm,
yes, you look good, fantastic. But make sure that you're asking the right questions. Be mindful that when you're around Thanksgiving, it's like, do you really need that second roll? It's just, if it's not helpful, then is it something we need to be saying?
right. I agree. So I'm actually really curious because of something you just mentioned. Obviously, you're in this journey of having your eating disorder. You think, you're getting all this positive reinforcement from the outside world saying, now I have attention. Now I have people looking at me in as not just the funny girl anymore. How did your nutritionist approach you? Because I can imagine being in that situation. I'm like, I'm doing everything right. Like everything is working in my favor. So you don't know that you need to ask for help. How
Right.
did she, I assume she, approach you?
Yes, she was the most delicate individual that I had ever met. Again, I met her pretty, I would say, in just loose terms. It wasn't something that it was just by accident. I actually took a class. I was about to graduate. I met her, I believe, a semester before I graduated. And my academic advisor said, hey, you need a science class. And I was like, oh my God, I'm out of here. Like, I'm struggling with senioritis here. I don't, and they're like, well, there's this nutrition class. And so I don't know if my academic advisor picked up on something that I was unaware of. That's a story I will never know. But she recommended that I take this nutrition class. And because I was heavy into working out, I loved hiking, I loved running, I loved walking, things like that. And so if it was social cues, or if she was just a really good person that knew that there was something up, she directed me and she subbed that class. Instead of taking a science class, take this nutrition class. And then sure enough, I mean, I wasn't there in a week, and the nutritionist, I would love to say her name, but I didn't get permission here, but love your nutritionist, please. And she was just, hey, I would love for you to take this questionnaire. And I was like, oh, I thought I was like, cool, she sees something in me. But it was actually a disordered eating disordered bulimia questionnaire. And sure enough, I'm assuming, I was just red flag after red flag. And that's when she took me on. And I know there was nobody else in the class that she took on. And I was just very blessed that she even did that for me, because she wasn't just being a teacher or a mentor. She was being a nutritionist that was looking after somebody that she did not even know. And she was using her gift to save somebody else's life. And so she was very calm and collected, very slow. And she shared with me words, and she was the one that shared with me, Carolyn, do you think it's a good idea to just eat an apple? Do you miss eating a tamale? Do you miss eating, asparagus, whatever the case may be? And she actually had to help me learn to love food again, because to me, it was just something I had to do. it was easier for me to just skip a lunch and a dinner, where now we have words like intermittent fasting and things like that. I was using that in a negative light, in a negative connotation. It's like, oh, well, I'm fasting. I'm just fasting. But I was fasting for one, the wrong reasons, and two, for days upon days upon days that were not helpful to my body. And she brought those words to light. She was using language that was loving and considerate, and made me come to the realization that I hated food. It was my enemy. And so she used proper language of, food is not your enemy. Food is a driving force for you to be able to get up the next day, and not to be scared that if I did stumble, if I did, where most people are like, even in our home right now, it's hard to keep, my husband loves cookies. And so it's hard to keep cookies in the home. Where me, I won't really touch them. I don't have a sweet tooth, but, most people will have a line of Girl Scout cookies, the whole two, they don't just eat one, where I would go out of my way to make sure Girl Scout cookies were not even allowed in my apartment. They were bad. They were gross. And so I had put in my mind that they were negative and they were bad for my body, when my nutritionist, went out of her way to say, no, food is not your enemy. It's what you're doing to your body. Are you taking in enough nutrition to make sure that you can get up the next day, you can go for a run? And so I appreciate that she used the language that I needed to hear. And I don't know, and this is probably a question for you, if language changes for each individual, but she did cater to me to make sure I heard what she was saying.
Yeah, I love her approach because just like you mentioned, whilst you came into the sessions with her initially thinking, okay, food is my enemy, I hate food, ultimately that's a symptom of something else that's underlying. And when we think about words are generative. Words help us to create a story that we're telling ourselves about something. And the words were telling you, like, food is an enemy, because not only did you have a negative relationship with food, you also had a negative relationship with your body. And so what I love about her approach was she's helping you to discover new words so you can generate new thoughts and new stories about not just food, but also your body. So I totally agree with that approach. And I think obviously it's been a powerful and formulative way for you to continue through life. So I'm curious, is there anything that you've taken from the work that you did with her that you still implement on a daily basis?
Yeah, yes. And this was 2007, 2008. And here we are years later. And I believe she tinkers on my social media, but I don't talk to her anymore. I mean, there was no reason for me to. I graduated and I moved on. And I feel bad because, I just kind of moved on. Once I was healed of, I say healed loosely, but, I felt good about myself. And yes, I had to, that was 2008, 2010, 15, even 2020, when the kind of pandemic hit. And it's like, wait, where did that come from? Or 30s came, and like, whoa, where did that come from? Now it's one of those, okay, now I have to start looking at my hormones. Now I have to look at how much drinking of the water I'm doing. Now that I've aged so much more since my, 21, we're 20 years later, my body's asking for different things. I can't be mad at my body for doing what it's doing. Now I have a healthy relationship with going to work out and exercising. Now I have a healthy relationship of what she taught me is to always taste the rainbow. And I know that's a tagline for something completely different, but I eat the rainbow every day. And I say every day loosely, at least 5 days a week, 6 days a week, I eat a rainbow. I want something colorful on my plate. That's just what I love to do, and something that she implemented where she tricked I say she tricked me. She knew I was a photographer, and or at that time I was an up and coming photographer. And she's like, all of the colors that you photograph of a flower, you see blues and purples and greens, and that's what I want on your plate. Just think of your plate to be a portrait. And she got into my mind in a healthy manner to make sure I'm eating color. eat your colors, have a color of the rainbows. And that I've taken that in for 20, 21 years now of just, I love the rainbow. It's beautiful. It's gorgeous to physically look at. That's what I want to be putting into my body.
Ugh, and that's such powerful advice for anyone to be able to implement literally today. I'd also love to ask you, for anyone that might be listening to this and might recognize some of those, let's say, negative eating behaviors, what guidance would you have for them?
Don't do it alone. That is probably my largest and deepest regret is my friends, my family knew that there was something. Okay, they knew that there was something going on, and they couldn't pinpoint it because, again, there were physical implications that I was doing well. You know, I was shaving off pounds and looking and feeling good on the outside, but they couldn't see what's going on the inside. It wasn't until hospital visits and emergency phone calls and things like that where they started to see, oh goodness, this is not good. What she's doing is not good. And, you know, don't struggle alone. Please, please, please don't struggle alone. That would be my first one. Second one, media lies to you every single day. Okay, media lies to you. Okay, we're talking magazines, social media, the news, commercials, movies, all of that. There are just extracurricular things that people struggle with, and they do it alone because they look at media. And it's just a cyclical situation that we have put ourselves in, and it's not for nothing. They definitely are doing that for a reason, right? They want us to buy this, or they want us to do that. And I think that that's what my two biggest things. Please don't struggle alone. And two, do not compare yourself to media, because it's a liar. It's just a liar. If you took 10 women the same age, different ethnicities, and they were all 130 pounds, every single one of them will look different. And if anybody thinks that that's not true, I'm asking you, go do your research. We are all built differently. We all have something to give. And we all have, our bodies need something different. And so that would be my call. Don't struggle alone, and do not compare yourself to media, because it's a liar.
Yes. Okay. I just have to highlight that second point that you made, because you mentioned something to me in a previous conversation. This is coming from you, the photographer. So you've photographed so many amazing, prominent people. And I just remember you sharing about one individual that you were taking photos of. And by all accounts, she was gorgeous and skinny and, famous, right? And then can you share a little bit about how she perceived herself?
Yes, so we have a beautiful, Houston has some renowned who's who, and I've been blessed to have been able to photograph these who's of the who in the Houston area. And this particular person came into the studio, and she was just hot to trot from head to toe. She was just put up in the most beautiful dress and earrings and jewelry. I mean, jewelry stores would let her borrow things to be photographed in. Okay. And her hair was done, makeup was to the T, and she was thin. She was gorgeous. She has all of these cookie cutter things that media shows us. Okay. Already. So we photograph her, get that done. We're in the editing process because she's going to be on some media sites. And she was just distraught, in tears of how she looked. And we're talking, this young lady was not old. She was young. She was in her prime. She didn't have any blemishes. She was gorgeous. But all she could see on the screen was more, I need more Photoshop. I need more Photoshop. I need more Photoshop. And it unfortunately came down to where she was so totally airbrushed, it didn't even look like her. And it was just sad. It made me reflect back to years later of, gosh, I know what you're I know what your mind is telling you, and it's a lie. It's a lie because she was physically gorgeous, but she was struggling on the inside. And if that's one big thing that I could stress is whatever is telling you that you are not beautiful, kind, loving, not enough, it's a lie. It's just an absolute lie. And it broke my heart to just see this absolutely incredibly popular, physically gorgeous individual thinking that she was just the bottom of the barrel, trash, ugliest thing. And I would like to say that she was probably just being modest or humble, but no, there was something significantly wrong with her heart. And so that's something, if I could stress to you, do not be so hard on yourself. It's just not sound. It's not real. If you're struggling with something that's not adding up, do not do this alone. And please don't be comparing yourself to media, because again, I was the individual that was photoshopping lies in
Mm.
Houston. I was photoshopping the front pages of magazines or photos or what media kits they would go out that there were very voluptuous women that were still gorgeous that on Photoshop were about 50 pounds lighter and they didn't look like themselves. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with Photoshop, but I know I felt bad because I was not helping. I was actually hurting because of what media was telling these women that they needed to look like. And I was doing that.
Wow. It just goes to show you, you never know what's going on inside of other people's minds and hearts. And so, what I'm going to do is below this episode, I'm also going to share some resources for people to be able to reach out to should they feel like they have some areas of their eating or body image that they would like to, have the assistance of someone else so that they can really work on creating that positive and loving relationship with food in their bodies. But before I let you go, number one, huge thank you for coming on today and sharing your amazing journey. You're such a testament to your dedication and commitment to loving yourself. And that is profound and it is tangible. And I'm so glad that we get to discuss it and to share it so that other women can see what's possible for them too. And secondly, I'd love for you to share how people can get in touch with you.
Oh, yes. I am so grateful. I am so grateful. I tell many people that struggle in this area at least every 6 months or so, somebody comes and just kind of, hey, I've heard your story. What happened? How did you do it? On both ends, whether it was the losing of the weight or coming out of disordered eating. And that is, I am so grateful that I didn't lose the battle. I
Yeah.
didn't lose the battle because that battle that was overcome gives me a chance to share it and help somebody else. And that's the goal. Is I want to share my story so somebody else doesn't have to struggle. So please do not hesitate to reach out to myself. You can find me on social media, Carolyn Soto Jackson. I'm wherever you need to find me. Instagram is probably the most prominent, or on Facebook. Also an author, a writer. I have a book that also does this journey. It's Wild Adventures, Finding Joy in the Journey. There was also a really good help if you want to kind of get through some of these items. Please pick that book up on your local bookstore or Amazon. And please do not hesitate to reach out to me. I would love to help you and get you into the right arms. And of course, Miss Renata, she is going to be able to really share some good resources with you. And I am so grateful that you have opened your doors for me today. Thank you so much for having me.
You are so welcome, guys. I hope that this journey, the challenges that Carolyn went through, has touched your heart, because it really has touched mine. And I know that there are so many women out there that really will be resonating with what you shared today. So please share this episode, share it with someone you love that perhaps you've not been sure how to venture into this topic of conversation yet. Share it with anyone that you know, because this idea of women's bodies having to look a certain way in order to be accepted, in order to be loved, is a lie. And we need to shine a light on it so that we can all accept bodies in whatever shapes and sizes that they are. Once again, huge thank you to you, Carolyn. And guys, I'll see you in the next episode.